knows where every document lives across your portfolio. Could you find everything that you need in that instance? For most of our customers, the honest answer is no. And the reason isn't that they don't have a document management solution. Most of them have SharePoint or a mix of document management solutions. The problem is that those solutions have become a dumping ground for their documentation. I'm Paul from Findable, and over the next 20 minutes, I'll show you why most real estate teams store documents in a broken way and what an intelligence layer on top of SharePoint actually looks like. A quick presentation with some information we've gathered from our customer base, practical, and we'll allow you to ask some questions in the end. So as we go through, if anything pops up, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll get to it towards the end. Before we get started, we'd love to ask you a quick question. So poll number one, just to understand who's joined us today. On this webinar. Okay, so we have a good mix of facilities and building management professionals with some asset managers and people coming from other roles as well. Welcome, and let's get started. Um, so let's start with the problem. Why has SharePoint become a dumping ground for documentation, and what can be done to fix it? To start off, McKinsey, IDC, and Forrester all converge on the same number that knowledge workers spend 1 to 1.5 days per week just searching for information they already have. In real estate, with scanned PDFs, legacy folder structures, um, that is at the upper range, at the upper end of that range. In almost every organization we work with, there's that one person that we mentioned in the beginning, that human search engine who knows where everything is. When they go on holiday, things tend to slow down. When they leave, institutional knowledge walks out the door with them. We worked with one portfolio owner recently where 25 out of their 35 strong asset management team were still using local drives to manage their documents rather than migrating to SharePoint that was implemented because they didn't trust the central folder structure that was built by that particular company. And that problem tends to compound quite quickly these days. Document volumes grow at about 20 to 25% annually from what we see across our client base. Every acquisition, every refinancing, every compliance cycle, it adds more and more documentation on top. A manual cleanup could fix that backlog once, but within months, it sort of drifts back to that same state of chaos. Um, so really what we're looking to talk about and solve today is that issue of poor naming conventions, duplicate files and folders on your SharePoint, personal knowledge silos, right? If people go, knowledge walks out with them. And if you don't have that structure established, if your data is not cleaned up, you're not able to search and find what you need effectively. Um, quick poll just to see what sort of solutions are you working with yourselves. You can pick multiple choices just to give us an idea of sort of what seems to be the going one amongst the people joined today. SharePoint seems to be the clear leader in the results. Um, and that's exactly what we'll talk about. And I think for a lot of you, it's a mix. It's a mix of a couple of the ones that you saw on the screen, and it's actually a very common pattern that we see across our client base as well. So what's the alternative? You could hire a law firm and outsource document classification and migration needs to them. We've heard it cost clients upwards of £4 a document to classify and add metadata when onboarding new assets. But if you have a portfolio of buildings with 1 million documents, that in itself is a £4 million cost that you would have to amortize in order to do so. And it would only work once because there's no ongoing monitoring or classification after the fact. So here's what Findable does instead. Same SharePoint, same documents. We connect via an API. It actually reads every document's content, not just the file name, classifies it against your preferred file path or taxonomy, and moves the file to the correct location. 4 simple steps, and your files never leave SharePoint. Same files, new locations, updated via a live API that makes sure that every time you upload a document, every time a new piece of information enters your data management solution, it's classified correctly, it's stored in the right place, and you're fully aware of what is or isn't there. Um, I'll just play a very brief video just to visualize what happens under the hood for you, and then we'll proceed. So like I said, we connect to your SharePoint via a live API. All of the documentation content is ingested by our AI. It then reads that content to understand what is a particular piece of information about, so it can make a reasoning decision on what is this document, where should it be stored, and based on your taxonomy, is it actually being stored in the right place? Now, if we take an example of how this is done, on the screen now a file that is called 12.4.567, etc., unit b3.1 list.pdf. The title itself for a human might be completely meaningless unless they're actually aware of what building this belongs to, and they know the unit itself. They would have to open it to know what it is and where to put it. But Findable reads the actual document content, so it understands that this is a lease agreement between Riverside Holdings and Greenfield Catering Services, dated 2019, for this specific unit. It classifies it as a lease contract with 100% confidence and shows you the full reasoning trail of why it did so. This matters because half of your documents, or a lot of your documents, are called meaningless names, right? You have poor naming conventions. People struggle to understand what sits inside the files. But the fact that you can circumvent that and have AI read the content and make a reasoning decision on where it should go fully solves that problem. So essentially, we don't rely on file names, we read the full content of your documents. So AI generated file name is something that can be provided, a full summary of the document, also something that can go into your SharePoint instance, the reasoning of why this needs to go to a particular location in your taxonomy, suggested document type, and the exact position, all automatic for anyone needs to get involved and confirm it. Classification is the foundation of structured data that can help you make decisions quicker and with more confidence. But it is also the capability that our customers tell us is worth the entire investment on its own. You define what great looks like for you. It can be your golden thread checklist, it can be your compliance pack, it can be your transaction due diligence standard, whatever your building needs. Then you can get a live view across your entire portfolio, every building color coded to understand where your data gaps are, especially in acquisition or disposal scenarios. If you're looking to build a comprehensive picture of what information is available for your building, that classification with AI we spoke about is exactly the tool that can provide you with a full audit trail and visibility of what your buildings have or haven't got. So unlike a one-off audit, this can be done automatically. So if a new document enters your SharePoint environment, that automatically gets pulled via the API, it gets checked, and the checklists get updated. So it's auto classification triggered by a new piece of information being created rather than someone manually having to do it. Um, and as one of our clients put it recently in a conversation, if they mess up one transaction, the cost of that is multiple times what Findable would cost for an entire year. Whilst classification and compliance monitoring are really powerful indeed, this is where it gets really interesting. So once your documents are classified, you can start querying your whole entire portfolio in natural language. Think of it as asking a knowledgeable colleague who's read every document across every building for help. So if you want to know which buildings are missing fire safety certs, uh, do we have supplier contracts for this building? Show me the leases expiring in the next 6 months. These type of questions that come up on a regular basis, questions that would previously have taken hours of folder diving and looking at files and opening PDFs, these can now be answered in seconds. Um, and here's what a real response on Findable that's connected to your SharePoint environment looks like. So I asked, what are the fire door ratings for this building? Within seconds, Findable went into your documents, found the ones mentioning fire door ratings, um, with every claim cited back to the source documents, and presented me a sort of clean outline of what are the fire door ratings, which areas of the building they are for, and then I can see the documents that where all of this is referenced on the side. Every answer with sources cross-referenced and takes seconds, doesn't take hours any longer. Now, if we look at the real impact on your businesses when it comes to poorly accessible or unstructured data, let us share some real numbers from our customer base, anonymized but validated in real conversations. So we mentioned this before, the manual alternative of hiring someone to classify your data and add metadata to it runs into the cost of multiple pounds per document, right? Largely depending on language complexity and the volume of information. Um, so for a portfolio with 1 million docs, that's an incredible cost, and it would only work once because there's no ongoing capabilities past that exercise taking place. Um, the other alternative is to do it manually within your own organization using your own resources, right? But the classification cost alone, just in labor, would be phenomenal as well, right? If you pay a law firm over £4 a document, you can expect pay less internally, but still a huge cost. Um, so from what we've seen, if you start automating this particular exercise, you start saving your internal users 5 to 7 hours a week just in search time for information alone. And one of our customers estimated that they're saving about £450,000 a year in just preparing the compliance packs for acquisitions and disposals across their portfolio. And really, where all of this lands in is how do you reduce the risk? How do you reduce the risk of missing information, misfiled documents, transactional discount risk? If you can't prove something, you can't quantify it, and therefore you have to take the risk of potentially getting less. for one of your assets, so asset value suffers. Um, and it's opportunities as well. If you can save people time, the opportunity cost is huge. Instead of searching for information, if they could use even a portion of that time to drive revenue generating activities, to provide better customer service, to support asset management, to get involved in business initiatives that are not a business drag on your resources. What would that look like in real terms across your organization? So a natural question to ask might be, well, what does it take to get started? Three things really. The most important one is there's no need for data migration. We can connect directly to your SharePoint environment. We can pull data natively. Your documents stay exactly where they are without leaving your instance. Two, start small but prove fast. Pick a handful of buildings, your messiest, most chaotic data. We'll process it, validate the results together with you, and we'll build a business case together using real numbers from your organization specifically. And three, security is paramount. That's one of the things that comes up in every single conversation. So we're ISO 27001 certified, we're SOC 2 compliant, and we have enterprise grade single security sign on as well. So your data never leaves your SharePoint environment and it's fully protected both in at rest and in transit. Um, if anyone would like to see this with your own documents, I will put a booking link in the chat. Feel free to book 15 or 30 minutes with us to see exactly what that could look like for you. And on that note, we'd like to launch the third poll to see what's the best next step for you. Fantastic. So it looks like most of you are here to find out more about how SharePoint could be made more intelligent, um, essentially looking at the solutions that are out there. Perfect. Um, Given we've got 10 minutes left on this webinar, let's move into questions. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll answer them one by one. Okay, the first question is on the accuracy of classification. How accurate is the findable classification solution for documents pulled out of our SharePoint? Um, the honest answer is 90% and upwards. Um, and surprisingly, the conflicts that we find in classification are not because the AI couldn't understand what the document is and where it should belong. But what we uncovered is that a lot of the documents that you have don't have a place to live in by default. So what we found to be the real challenge is how do you address the data that doesn't currently sit neatly within your preferred taxonomy? And that is one of the things that we've spent quite a bit of time working through with clients is these specific document types currently don't have a place to land. Where do you want them stored? How do you want them structured, etc. And the classification improves constantly, especially if there's a feedback loop that you can also provide on that classification front. Um, the next question is processing times. How long does it take for you to ingest and process the documentation? Um, it really depends on the volume, but typically it's within a day or so rather than weeks. Um, so Findable's API is not limited to anything. It's really only the SharePoint API that can be a challenge, to be fair. But if we take an example of, say, 3 assets, 15,000 documents, we could ingest, classify, and sort it all out within a day to 2 days tops. So it's fairly scalable and quite quick to deploy in that sense. Does it work with non-English documentation? It does actually, and surprisingly so. It's been tested with German, Czech, Italian, French, Norwegian, Danish documents, and it works perfectly fine. Um, the classification engine in that sense is language agnostic. It can access and understand content from any language, really. And on top of that, you can also ask your documents questions in any language and get answers in the language that you're asking the question, regardless of what language the document is in. So for those of you who have to deal with portfolios or buildings in multiple different countries, but you're centrally based and you don't speak the language, you could still get very good results by just natural language query the documents in a language that works for you, essentially. Does Findable consider which documents a user is allowed to access when chatting with it? The answer is yes, it respects your SharePoint permissions. So when we set the API, define what documents and content we can pull, and those permissions are respected essentially the way you set them up across your organization. And Johannes, I saw your question already got answered by Ruan. So does Findable change the name of the documents as well, or just classify and sort them? The answer is you can change the file name using AI. And we've seen that be a particular need, especially for drawings, where you have naming conventions from the construction side, handover side, but it doesn't work for you in operations or sort of asset management. Just one example where we can help rename the files based on the actual content or the actual titles of documents. How do you handle duplicates and keep track of which document is the correct one? That's a very good question. Duplicates are identified with 100% accuracy on Findable. You essentially check the content of those documents at pixel level together with the size. So regardless of what the file name is, if we find a duplicate, we're 100% certain it's an exact replica of another document. The solution will then link that to the original file on your platform, normally by taking the oldest one to be the sort of the one source of truth, and it will show you what duplicates of that specific file you have, so you can make a decision on which ones to keep. And we can automate the archiving of those files as well. In terms of what is the correct one, I would say the most common sense approach is look at the date of the document and keep sort of the oldest one, right? The one that first entered the system. But there's multiple ways to look at that, and we could implement some rules around that as well. It's a conversation. What is the underlying AI model that you use? It really depends, Paul. No one model is equipped to do everything in the best possible way. There are several that we have built ourselves, which are proprietary to Findable. to give you an example, drawing classification happens on our end without the LLMs being used because we've trained it, we've built it, it's now ingested millions of drawings, and that's what's driving it. But in terms of natural language query capabilities, that's OpenAI for now because it delivers the results. But when it comes to visual identification of signatures, for example, or handwriting, it really depends. We work with several models to drive the best outcomes. A question from Janus: are there risks involved of getting our company's sensitive information exposed through AI systems? Fantastic question, comes up quite a lot. The short answer is no, because we don't share any of your documentation with any of the LLMs. And security is at the heart of what we do as a business, not surprisingly, given that we have that AI label attached to us. But if you wanted to have a follow-up conversation, we can share the security credentials and give you that confidence and talk in more detail about how none of this is actually pushed out to any of the AI model providers. What analytics or usage insights can you get? Does the platform tell you what queries are failing, what documents never get found, etc.? That would be useful for actually managing knowledge gaps. The short answer is yes. Just need a big enough pool of day-to-day users, and we could extrapolate some of those findings into a report, if you will. Another way of doing it is implementing your specific key information checklists, so then the system can flag what items are missing off of those across individual buildings or portfolios of assets as well. But analytics-wise, every query is a record. So we could anonymize the data and look at what is searched for the most, where the sort of not just information gaps, but where are the knowledge gaps within your organization when people try to find things. Will it automatically classify documents, and where do you build your intelligent layer? Is it within our SharePoint tenant or external data cloud? The short answer is your information does not leave SharePoint. We are not pulling it out of there. So the classification happens within your SharePoint instance. So if you think about it, if you have a current way of structuring your data, what Findable will do is just help shift that into your preferred taxonomy, right? So it sort of happens within SharePoint. So it's still within your SharePoint tenant. We do connect your information and we make a copy of the document content to provide that service, but it stays within your SharePoint environment. Paul, great question. Even the newest LLMs tend to hallucinate from time to time. How do you handle this when I ask Findable for information from our documents? Two things. One, exact source citations within your documents of where the answers are coming from, so you can cross-check and reference that yourself. Two, a bit more complicated. So the short answer is we also build some filters or sort of framework in between the user asking a question and the system producing a result. So there's a process that allows us to clarify user intent for better results. And then, like I said, citations show you exactly where the information is coming from rather than you having to trust the answer blankly. If it is on SharePoint, what sort of space is required if we have around 15 terabytes of data? Um, That's a great question. I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer this, as you all probably gathered. I'm not the most technical of people, but if you have that storage within your SharePoint, then you don't need to do anything. If anything, the likely outcome is we find a lot of duplicate files and files that actually drive no value for you as a business. So sort of information types that don't actually get classified or looked at, thumbnails, pictures of things that can be identified, etc. So would expect your storage needs to drop if you choose to archive things that are duplicates or things that actually don't mean anything in your SharePoint. Um, so from your side, you don't have to worry about additional storage needs if you engage with Findable in that sense. I hope that that answers that particular question. Um, Mindful of the time, appreciate all of you joining us today, and thank you for all the great questions that you asked. Feel free to reach out to us directly if you would like to continue the conversation. And we will follow this up with a recording and a summary of the webinar as well. Hope you have a great day and thank you all again. Take care.